Native women face some of the highest rates of domestic violence and sexual violence in the nation. They also face increasingly disparate rates of homelessness and housing insecurity. This episode of Speaking Our Truth features our Specialty Institute, recorded in June. This Specialty Institute will introduce the newly created STARS Indigenous Safe Housing Center. It will offer important and timely presentations designed to address the spectrum of housing issues for Indigenous victim survivors. It will also showcase promising or best practices related to domestic violence and housing, and it will provide valuable resources, support, and recommendations. OCO, hello everyone, and welcome back to Speaking Our Truth Podcast for Change, a podcast by the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. I'm your host, Leanne Pippin, and I'm a member of Cherokee Nation. Before we get started, let's hear a word from the NIWRC.
The National Indigenous Women's Resource Center offers culturally grounded resources and materials to support tribal domestic violence programs and grassroots advocates. Learn more at niwrc.org/resources.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Wopida. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Gwendolyn Packard. I'm Ihanktawan, Dakota. I'm the Senior Housing Specialist with the new STARS Indigenous Safe Housing Center at the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. After months and months of planning, the Specialty Institute is finally happening. We are so thrilled here at NIWRC to bring this amazing training into fruition. This training represents an exciting collaboration between NIWRC's Training and Technical Assistance Team and the newly established Indigenous Safe Housing Center, STARS, which you will be hearing more about in a few minutes. Victim survivors of domestic and sexual violence and trafficking face significant barriers and challenges in finding safe, available, accessible, and affordable housing. Domestic violence is a leading cause of homelessness for women and their children. And homelessness and housing insecurity are a stark reality for so many victim survivors when they flee abusive homes or try to flee abusive homes. And as a result, many victim survivors will remain in abusive and violent households. For many, their experiences are confounded by economic instability. Often this is perpetuated by their abusers and the location where they live. In many tribal communities, there's limited employment and economic opportunities, and many tribes are located in deep pockets of poverty with high rates of unemployment. Scarce housing and access to shelter or other resources is limited or unavailable. As a result, victim survivors face numerous economic obstacles in obtaining and keeping housing. Other barriers that come into play are housing policies, including lease agreements, which can further complicate a victim survivor's situation. The nature of domestic violence often makes it necessary for a woman to leave her home immediately. And if she is the lessee of the housing unit, she may incur financial penalties for violation of her lease. Payment of such penalties is economically unfeasible for so many people. Victim survivors may also have trouble during the application process for housing, which can be really complicated and burdensome. They may have been evicted because of their partner's violence or fled their abuser in violation of a lease, and fighting their abuser in self-defense can be seen as a violent criminal history. For many years, women living in federally funded housing in the U.S. could be evicted along with their abusive partners for his criminal activity. But this changed with the 2005 Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA, which prohibited public housing authorities from denying housing or evicting solely on the basis of domestic violence. In 2013, this protection was expanded to include other federally subsidized programs. And we'll be hearing about the new housing protections under VAWA 2022 on the third day. In addition to introducing the newly created Indigenous Safe Housing Center, STARS, this specialty institute will provide outstanding presentations by leading experts in the field that will address the spectrum of housing issues for Indigenous victim survivors, showcase promising or best practices around domestic violence and housing, and provide valuable resources and support.
Okay, so I am super excited that we are starting us off by introing our new center. This is something that we have worked on for a really long time, organically with our work group members. So I think the first thing I want to do is just recognize our work group members. And if you head over to our website, which is niwrc.org/housing, you can see a list of all of their names, the amazing places that they're working, and some of the other information on what we've kind of been up to the last few years. But I'm just going to go ahead and get us started. So today's opening plenary is to talk about our new center. The logos at the bottom that you see, obviously, in addition to our new logo, which we'll talk about in a minute, these are our MOU partners. So I just wanted to recognize them as well before I pass it off to Gwen. But it's the Cardozo Law Institute in Holocaust and Human Rights, the Alaska Native Women's Resource Center, the Strong Hearts Native Helpline, and then the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. I'm going to briefly introduce myself really fast. Caroline LaPorte, that was actually a picture of me when I moved back to Miami from DC. I know I look so happy. It was like the sun was shining. I am an attorney. I'm also a judge at Little River Band of Ottawa Indians, of which I'm an immediate descendant. And I am the new director of the Tribal Safe Housing Center. I work really closely with Gwen, which is amazing, and other NIWRC staff whom I obviously love as family. But I'm going to pass it over to Gwen so she can introduce herself and keep us going.
Great, thank you, Caroline. Again, Gwendolyn Packard. I'm in Hunktawan, Dakota. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I've been with NIWRC since the beginning. And then just more recently, I've moved to STARS, the Indigenous Safe Housing Center. And so Caroline and I are just started this initiative about 6 months ago. And we've got a lot of work done. And as you can see, if you check out our website, and I also just want to mention Denise Neal is our program assistant. And I believe she's on this webinar or this HUVA meeting as well. So Denise is Suquamish and part of our housing team here at STARS. Before we begin, we have this land acknowledgement that we created specific to the STARS Indigenous Safe Housing Center. And so I just want to lead with that. And we made this very global in terms of land acknowledgement. So we want to acknowledge the one sun, the one moon, the one earth mother, the one people, our winged, finned, and four-legged relatives. We acknowledge all our relatives, the rocks, the mountains, the sacred waters, the insect world, and the plant kingdom. We take a moment to breathe and connect with the land we're on. We take a moment to breathe and acknowledge the ancestors, those that are here and those that are yet to come. We take another breath to acknowledge that our relationship with the land is reciprocal, that this land does not belong to us. We belong to the land. So we had created that early on in our formation. And I know Caroline, coming up soon, Caroline has some additional slides that she'll share that really describe how we've shaped our organization. And STARS was really created to address the need for safe and affordable housing for survivors of domestic violence and sexual violence, and acknowledging that it's the leading cause of homelessness for women, and that also inadequate housing is also one of the top 2 reasons for child removal. So we approach this from so many different directions. And I think the work that we're doing and the work that we'll continue to do over the next several years is critical into creating strong linkages between the housing community, and the movement to end violence against Indigenous women. Housing is a basic human right, yet survivors of gender-based violence frequently report access or sustainability issues. These are a lot of things that we'll be delving into. And we want to address the layers of vulnerability that victim survivors experience in housing, in securing safe, affordable housing. So we were funded in fiscal year 22 to provide training and technical assistance and policy regarding safe access for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. We collaborate with service organizations, TA providers, and you'll be hearing more about them in our presentation, tribal, state, federal, and local governmental organizations, as well as tribal housing organizations and authorities. And so that was kind of the funding, the basis for our funding. And we've expanded, it just in the 6 months have expanded significantly on that. The mission statement, and before I get any further, let me just mention that STARS stands for safety, training, technical assistance, resources, and support. And I also wanted to just draw attention to our logo. This was created by Jerica Fountain, and we like this logo because it was really representative of our work. It was the past and the future. It was on reservation and off reservation, and we wanted to bring in all the elements of Earth Mother, and climate change is really central to a lot of the work that we're doing as well. The mission statement that we created for the center is Tribal Safe Housing Center. We advocate for safe housing for all our relatives, and we do this work through centering indigeneity, acknowledging our relationship to Earth Mother, building on each other's gifts, resisting oppression and erasure, and acting upon the prayers of our ancestors to honor diversity and create belonging for us all. And our vision is safe housing for all our relatives.
Some of you actually may see yourselves in this photo. Hello, everybody. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that we spoke about again was just our work group. So this center developed organically out of a space that we've been working within since really 2018, bringing together domestic violence and sexual assault advocates in Indian country, and then advocates who work on homelessness and housing insecurity, right? And what we found was that they tend to be two incredibly siloed spaces from one another. The housing and or the housing insecurity and homelessness advocates, they didn't necessarily consider themselves to be doing gender-based violence work, which, right, is not true, because we know that the vast majority of women who find themselves with housing insecurity have experienced domestic violence or sexual assault, right? So they are doing that work, regardless of whether or not that's the lens they were necessarily applying or centering. They were still very much engaging with survivors in their space. And then one of the things that we saw really benefiting DVSA advocates in tribal spaces from being able to learn from the housing and housing insecurity and homelessness advocates was in regards to funding. Actually, the individuals that work primarily in housing or in shelter are incredibly good at layering funding, at being creative with funding, and at systems advocacy, which is useful, right? At least until we get to a point where we don't need that anymore. So the work group started as a collaboration with the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, which is obviously a non-native organization, but who does run the mainstream housing TA groups in this space. And also with the Alaska Native Women's Resource Center, many of whom you probably know and work with. We convened in June of 2019 in Phoenix in person for the first time. And then also in February of 2020 in Minneapolis, which was right before the pandemic hit. It was brutally cold. I actually remember walking or trying to walk to a restaurant and physically feeling like I wasn't going to make it, which is really sad. And then we held a bunch of different events over the last few years. So even during the pandemic, we really tried to remain active in this space and continue to grow what we were hoping to develop, which eventually was this center. So we held a research briefing in 2019. We published our report in January of 2020, and that's available on our website if you head over there to visit it. We've held multiple webinars and podcasts. We actually created a specific housing track at NIWRC's legal symposium. We did a briefing in Minnesota, which was great. We also got to partake in the MMIW walk that was occurring there. And then just other random presentations and tracks at Women Are Sacred. But it's just, this slide is here to just sort of call out the fact that this really started from a group of people and again, developed really out of relationships and out of seeing a need for it.
For those listening and want to learn more about STARS, Indigenous Safe Housing Center, visit niwrc.org/housing. There you will find links to follow them on social media. Their handle is @safehousing4all with the number 4. And don't forget to sign up for their mailing list. Thank you for joining us. I have been your host, Leanne Pippin with NIWRC. You can listen to more episodes of Speaking Our Truth Podcast for Change at niwrc.org/podcast. Widow, and thank you so much for sharing space with us today. Be well.